Hi, this is Dr. Evdokia, and I'm going to be presenting the history of Greece as I've interpreted it. And now for a quick drink break. So you can have metaxa with Coke, ouzo, or masita, which is my new favorite Greek liqueur, but I'm drinking a White Russian because that's all I have right now. So why did I decide to do this? Well, Bapu Sotiri from Greece, he is my grandpa, and he came from a little town called Plataea, which is down here in the right-hand corner. And my yaya, Eleni, she's from Thiva, up here in the right-hand corner. And Bapu Sotiri would tell us all these stories. Oh, this is where, the whole Persian army was stopped, and and that changed the world entirely. So I decided to do some independent research and look into some of these stories he told. And so we're going to be focusing on the town of Thiva, where my yaya is from, Plataea, where Bapu is from, Athens, and Sparta. All right. So Bapu moved from Greece to the U.S. in the 1950s, and he worked for about 5 years, saved up enough money to bring my yaya Eleni over and my mom Keti, and they boarded the Olympia J. Thurston, and they traveled all the way from Piraeus to New York, and then in 1958 they were naturalized, and this is our naturalization paper to prove everything. So we're not illegal immigrants, basically. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the ancient Greece. And we're going to be going from 2700 BC all the way to the siege of Plataea.
Oh no.
And this is a long time, but we're going to cover it in a pretty reasonable amount of time. So let's get going. So the Minoans, they were the first inhabitants of Greece. They were obsessed with bulls. And if you remember, Yanni and Sophia have this painting in their living room. It's one of the original copies. So the Minoans came from Egypt. They're like, oh, we're done building these pyramids. We're going to move up north from Egypt to Greece. And they formed all of these cities throughout Greece. So Crete was their big hometown down here. And then they also founded Thebes, which where Yaya's from up here. It's all the way up here, actually. Because they found grinding stones and bronze tools. And, okay. So, what happened to the Minoans? In 1600 BC, in Santorini, there was a giant volcano. And then after the volcano, there was a giant tsunami. And then there was a giant amount of cloud and ash that came down and destroyed all of the farmland in Greece. And then that was the end of the Minoans. So after the Minoans went bye-bye, the Mycenaeans came in. And these guys were dudes that came from the north. And they traveled all the way down south in Greece. And they formed all these different cities. They were big wartime military guys. They had fortresses. They were war people. And the reason that these guys were different was because the Minoans had Linear A, which was hieroglyphics, and these guys were considered not Greek. They were Minoans. And then the Mycenaeans, when they came down, they had these tablets that were Linear B script. And this was actually the original language of Greece, and this has been deciphered. The Linear A scripts have not been deciphered at all, so no one knows what these mean. Are these hieroglyphics or scribbles or what? But if you want to take that on as a project, like, you can. So the Mycenaeans, they were, like I said, war people. They formed the kind of basis of Greek warfare, which were shields and spears. And they also wore these boar tusk helmets, which were really cool. And they had a big city in Mycenae, which was down in southern Greece. And they formed this city and built this giant wall around it. And the entrance was called the Lion's Gate because it had 2 lions. And it was called the Cyclopean Gate because the stones that were used to build it were so big that only like a cyclops could build it, because like humans weren't strong enough to carry that kind of stone. So the Mycenaeans, they had these beehive tombs, and no one really knows if these were actually tombs or not because they never found anything in them. So now on to the mythology of Thebes. So where did Thebes come from? Thebes is also known as Theba in Greek. It is also known as Cadmea after Cadmus, who was the founder of Thebes. And he was a Phoenician that came down. His dad was a king in Egypt. And his dad formed Egyptian Thebes, which had 1,000 gates. 1,000. So Zeus was the chief of the gods, and he had like a crush on Europa, who was Cadmus' sister. So he's like, oh, I need that. So he decided to become a white bull, which from the Minoan times was kind of a sacred animal, and the Mycenaeans like also stole this, so he became a white bull. And then Europa was like, oh my god, look, like a white bull, like I need to go pet that thing. So she pets Thebes or Zeus, and then Zeus is like, oh, you're coming with me, like you're now abducted and I've got you. So Cadmus is like, shit, this sucks. Like, Zeus took my sister, he's the chief of all the gods, what do I do? So he goes down to Delphi, and he talks to the Oracle of Delphi, and he's like, what do I do? And she's like, all right, I've got it. I've got it all figured out. You're not going to find your sister. You're going to find your own city, because that's more important. And she's like, okay, you're going to follow a cow. And he's like, a cow? Yes. A fucking cow. So Cadmus leaves Delphi and he finds a cow, and then they travel all around Greece, and then when
any cow?
When the cow stops, he stops to drink from water. And this is right outside of Thebes. And so he's like, this is a perfect place to form the city I was supposed to start. So he forms the city of Thebes, which was also known as Cadmea back in the ancient times after Cadmus. And the city he formed was made up of 7 gates. This is what it looked like. And then this is Thebes in the ancient times on the right. It had 7 gates. And it was later named Thebes because Cadmus's dad formed the 100-gate Thebes of Egypt, because he was Phoenician, remember? And modern-day Thebes is built all on top of old Thebes. So in modern-day Thebes, when you're driving around, this is what you see. You see rocks and dirt and excavation sites. And if you see this is the old Mycenaean palace. And it's in the center of Thebes. Because, like I said, modern-day Thebes is built on top of ancient Thebes. The northern part of the palace is actually turned into a museum, which is really freaking cool. So as you're going to the museum in Thebes, you're walking on top of ancient Mycenaean palace from about 2000 BC. How cool is that? 16,000 BC.
16,000.
And these are the gates. The Electria Gate, which is on the road to Plataea in Athens, and that's the gate right there. This is the Protides Gate, and that's all that's left of it. Some stones, not a big deal. You're also walking around Thebes and you see this park, and you're like, oh, this would be a great park for Telly. But what you realize is that these are actually old beehive tombs from the Mycenaeans, which is that's really cool, right? Like, look at that. All right, so what happened to the Mycenaeans? Well, no one really knows, actually. These guys just vanished. They were taking over Greece. They built these giant-ass palaces. They had kings in, like, every little area. And then it was either a famine, they went to war with each other, no one really knows, but they decided to flee Greece, went up to northern Greece, and eventually down into Egypt. And in Egypt, they found these old paintings showing these what are called sea people who came back down to Egypt to invade. And these were thought to be the Mycenaeans. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered about 2,000 years from 2700 BC, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans. Now let's move on to the Dark Ages.
It was about 1,000 years.
So the Dark Ages, nothing happened. There were the Greeks down in Greece, and Thebes was a city of like 400,000 people and went down to 1,000. The only things that they have from this period of time were these cemeteries where they found people buried. Here, these little triangles. Ancient map.
All right, then skip the Dark Ages.
Nothing happened. City-states. City-states started forming. Sparta, Athens, Corinth, Thebes. And these became modern-day Greece. And a democracy was born. Democracy, is a complicated thing.
Yeah, it is. It can be.
They're like, okay, well, everyone who owns land, who is a white male,
That doesn't sound like democracy.
could vote. And the city-states formed, and Athens was really lame. Like, totally lame. Thebes, on the other hand, was like a really big city. It knew what was up. And Sparta, Argos, those guys were like the big cities. Thebes was a badass. It was like a cultural center like San Francisco. They had art, they had horses, everything. And these times, the city-states were at war with each other. They had these helmets, they had shields, they had these spears, and they formed these things called phalanx. And if you had enough money, then you could buy your own shield. And the phalanx worked because people in the front got pushed by the people in the back, and it was like a rugby scrimmage. Thebes, like I said, was a cultural center. They had a lot, They had a lot of things going on. And these pithos were these big vases where they held stuff in.
Like grain or something?
Grain, wine. And one out of the 5 famous pithos from Thebes is in Greece. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, they purchased one for $32 million in 1899. And then The Louvre has three of the Pythos. That's it. All right. So the other cool thing that the Athenians had were these sculptures, and they had the bell-shaped idols that are now found at the Louvre. And I don't know what these were used for, but it doesn't matter. And then they also made these tripods, which were these offerings to the Apollo, the sanctuary of Apollo. And they would line the road on the way to the sanctuary of Apollo. And Herodotus saw these and was like, oh, okay, these must have been offerings. So these tripods were also found in Athens because they were given as gifts if people won the Olympian battles. So Thebans also had their whole set of different coins, and they had these Theban magistrate staters, which were made by 4 different dudes, minted coins, and they had a Boeotian shield on one end, and then they had amphora on the other side. And then they also had the initials of the 4 different guys that were minting coins. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, you guys. We've done the city-states. The city-states are now here. They're here to stay. They've got a lot of money, a lot of power. But Greece is doing its own thing, and Persia, on the other hand, is building up its entire kingdom. So then it's the start of the Greco-Persian Wars, because the Persians up north and east were like, no, Athens and Greece, you're ours. So the Greco-Persian Wars started, and this is told by 3 philosophers, Herodotus, Theocles, and Pausanias. And these were 3 Greek historians. And we don't have any recollection of what happened from the Persian perspective.
Well, his history is written by the victors, right?
Yeah. So the Greco-Persian Wars are broken down into 4 parts. The Ionian Revolt, the First Invasion, Second Invasion, and Battle of Plataea, where Bapu is from. And who were the Persians? Okay. The Persians were up north, east. They took over everything. They took over every city, and then they said, hey, city, we'll help you out. We'll build some infrastructure. We'll give you some food. All you have to do is just say, okay, we'll pay Persia tax. And the Persians also let every little city keep their own local person and also their own religion. So it was a pretty good deal. The Persians got a bad rep, but I don't understand why. They were just trying to help out, you know? So the first Greco-Persian War was, remember I said the Mycenaeans traveled all over by boat at the end of their time? So they landed in eastern Greece, which is kind of modern-day Turkey, and they were known as the Ionian Greeks. And they said, we've had enough of Persia. We want them out. And they killed a bunch of Persians that were taking over the area. And then they went to Sardis, which was the local Persian capital. And then they burnt that shit to the ground. And Persia was pissed. And then they came all the way from Persia, and they came full force, and they killed all of the Ionian Greeks. Darius was emperor of Persia, and he was furious that the Greeks had burnt down his holy beloved city of Sardis. And so he shot a bow up into the sky and said, Zeus, I'm going to burn Athens to the ground. And every night before dinner, he had his servants say, Master, remember the Athenians 3 times.
Wait, so he believed in Zeus?
They believed in the gods. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Darius was pissed, and he was like, Greece is going to be mine. So he came down into Greece, and he brought his full naval ship, And the naval ship was coming around northern Greece, and it crashed into Mount Athos. Yeah, multiple ships. And their whole fleet got destroyed. 300 ships, 20,000 men. The Persian army was like not very strong anymore. And so this was the first part of the invasion of Greece. I'm going to take a minute just to talk about Mount Athos because a lot has happened there. So Virgin Mary was also crashed into Mount Athos just like the Persians did. She was traveling with something Luke, I don't know, the Constantine, the Byzantine someone. And they were on their way to visit Lazarus, and they crashed into Mount Athos. Virgin Mary stepped off the boat, and she was like, "Oh my God, ti oro buhine. How beautiful is Mount Athos. I'm going to decide to call this now the Garden of my Son." And as a result, Greece built up all these monasteries over the years. And then the Serbians and Russians came down, and then they built more monasteries. And it's been a sacred site since. And because Virgin Mary said that this was now the garden for her son, no woman is allowed on Mount Athos. And this includes little chickens and goats. No women. Period. You have to be able to grow a beard. Virgin Mary discovered it. I don't understand why women aren't allowed, but they're not. So during World War II, Mount Athos was like, "Oh, we're so much better than Greece." And they sent a letter to Hitler and said, "Hey, Hitler, this is a very holy site. Virgin Mary crashed on the shore here, so you need to protect Mount Athos." So then Hitler became the high protector of Mount Athos, and as a result, never bombed it, never touched it, nothing.
No. Sausage Party Island, you can't touch that.
End of World War II, fast forward to 2018, Putin's been to Mount Athos 2 or 3 times because of the Russian monasteries there. And just recently, Greece did not allow some Russian clerics to come in because they were thinking that the Russians were using Mount Athos as a spy sanctuary. Okay. So, now we're still in the first invasion of Greece, of the Persians. The remaining ships that didn't get crashed in Mount Athos sailed down south, just north of Athens, and they landed in Marathon. The Athenians were there ready to fight, and they had the high ground, and they leveled the Persians. And that was the end of the Persians in the Battle of Marathon.
You're not going to talk about the guy who ran 26 miles?
There was some guy that ran 26 miles according to the history of Sean. But, so the Battle of Marathon, the Persians just got defeated. And like I was saying, remember Athens was no one, right? It was totally lame. It sucked as a city. So after the Battle of Marathon, all of Greece was like, "Athens, you guys are badasses. You know how to fight. You're just like the best." So then Athens became the leader of the Delian League, which was like the Greek Central League. And they became the shit. At the same time, they found silver mines in southern Greece down by Lavrio. And they became not only highly respected, but they also had a lot of money. So with that money, they built these Athenian triremes, were these like triple-decker boats. And every deck had guys with oars, and they were like a few feet from the water. They were like going so fast. And then they had bronze or silver battery ram, because there was no steel, guns, gunpowder, nothing. So in order to take a ship down, you had to like ram them from the top. So after the Battle of Marathon, Persia went back north, and they said, "Okay, fine, whatever." For a while,
we're done here.
they got their army together. They got things together. They actually sent down several Persians to Greece, ambassadors as they were called, to try to rally up support. And their Persian ambassadors would go to these cities and say, hey, look, like, you fight for us, you work with us, we got your back, we're going to win this anyway. You see how much land, how much power we already have. Persian army had everything. And some of the Greek city-states agreed to do so, but not the majority. So after that happened, there was the second invasion of Greece, 480 BC, the Battle of Thermopylae. The Persians came down south from after retreating. They landed in Thermopylae. The Athenians marched up north, and they're like, oh, we killed the Persians in the Battle of Marathon. What do they've got on us now? Nothing. We'll take you out. So the Persians on the right, they're here in red, and then on the left are the Persians in red. The right are the Greeks and the Athenians mostly. Amongst the Athenians, there was a traitor. He went over to Sparta and said, yo, Spartans, there is a mountain goat trail that goes around the mountains to the back of the Athenian camp. You need to use that. And they did. So they sent a group of their Spartan army up around the mountain trail, and then they killed all of the Athenians from the back. And that was it. The Athenians lost like buku amount of people, and it was just a huge defeat. Herodotus said that the Persians, this battle had immortal Persians. And the reason they were called immortals was because after they had died or gotten injured, a Persian would change into all their clothing and armor, and then they would take their spot. And so as a result, they got called immortals. So after the Battle of Thermopylae, the Athenians retreated. They went way down south, past Corinth, which was the only land bridge to southern Greece where Sparta was hanging out. The Persians went all the way to Athens, and they burned that shit to the ground. Finally, Darius got what he wanted, burning Athens to the ground. Only this time it wasn't Darius, it was actually Emperor Xerxes who took over, because Darius was like trying to quell a revolt in Egypt, and then he ended up dying. So anyways, it was Xerxes who got to burn Athens to the ground. But the Athenians had already retreated, so it was like no big deal for them. Part of the Parthenon got burnt and destroyed. But it was at its early stages of development, so it still was kind of being built. So you have the Persians who have burnt down Athens. That's where they're camped out. South of Corinth, you have the Athenians and the Spartans. The Persians didn't dare invade Corinth because Corinth was heavily barricaded. They built this giant barricade. This was before there was even a canal there. And they said, no, Persia, you're not going to be able to break through this. So remember, Athenians had these triremes, these badass warboats. So they didn't get killed because the battle happened in Thermopylae, which was on land. So the Athenians had all these triremes, and they were like, oh shit, how are we going to get the Persians to come battle us on water? So this time, they had Athenian pretend to be a traitor. And he went all the way to Persia and said, yo, Persia, the Greeks are just shaking in their boots. They're messed up. They are disorganized. They can't do shit. They are just weak and lame, and you need to invade them. At night, the Persians were like, yes, we're going to take down all of Greece. So, meanwhile, the Athenians brought their triremes, and they lined their triremes up in the the canal of Salamis in red. And in the middle of the night, the Spartans came in, and they decided that they were going to like win. They were going to beat the Athenians were retreating. I don't know. And the Athenians rammed the shit out of them. And millions of Persian ships got destroyed.
Hundreds, I think, probably.
Okay. Now what's next, right? So, we have had the Battle of Marathon, where the Thebans won the Persians. We then have the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Persians beat the Athenians, and then Athens got raided. We have the Battle of Salamis, where Greeks destroyed the Persians. After the Battle of Salamis, the Persians retreated up north. They landed near Thebes. And the Thebans were like, yeah, no problem, Persia. We're going to treat you to the best dinner you've ever had. And guess what? You can invite 50 of your leading commanders because we just like you. You know, you're going to win. So Persians went to Greece with the Thebans. And then they were hanging out there. They set up their camp just east of the Sopos River from Plataea. Plataea, you remember, this is where Papu Sotiri is from. Thebes is where Yaya is from. So then, I completely forgot to mention this. So, Sparta had, the way it was set up is it had two kings. And they ruled everything. And they also had a kind of governing body where the kings could get voted out. So in Sparta, before the Battle of Plataea, they kicked out one of their kings, Demetrius. And he got exiled to Persia. And then he became like a Persian, I don't know, military guy. But he was still loyal to Sparta. And he told Sparta, and he said, look, the way he did this was on a wax tablet that was blank. But once you got rid of the wax, underneath the wood, there was actually a written inscription. So this ex-Spartan military guy who got exiled to Persia warned the Spartans and the Greeks down south that the Persians had retreated up to Thebes. So that's how they knew they were there. So the Persians were camped out here, and Athens and Sparta marched up north, and they set up camp here and also in the mountains. So this is Mount Kitharon up here. This is a famous wind thing. People jump wind gliding thing. So they were up here camped out. So you had Sparta and Athens on the left of the river, and then you had the Persians on the right. And Thebes, because they took the Persians out to dinner, were like, sure, no problem, we'll come fight with you. So for 3 weeks, the Persians and the Greeks stared each other down. They were like, we're not budging. I like our spot. I'm not going to come fight you. Like, we're just going to look each other down.
Standoff.
Standoff. So the Persians sent like groups of like 3 or 4 guys on horses to try to evoke the Greeks, and the Greeks were like, hell no, we're not moving. So what do the Persians do? The Persians poison their Garfinian spring, where Athens and Sparta and these guys were getting all their food from. And then they went around back and they cut out their supply line. So Sparta, Athens had like no food whatsoever. And the Spartans and Athenians retreat. The Persians are like, finally, fuck yeah, we're gonna like come attack while they're retreating. So the Persian army way outnumbered the Greek army. But it didn't matter. The Greeks had the highland. They fought the Persians and the Thebans. Remember, the Thebans were not on the right side here. And This one Sparta soldier took a stone and he threw it across the field. He threw it and it hit Marsonius's head and killed Marsonius. Marsonius was the guy running the whole Persian army at that time. Marsonius went down.
He sniped it?
The Greeks, first sniper. The Greeks took them all out. They were just like leveled. Because the Greeks were like, they had their shields, they had their like
their
phalanx,
and it's like having a tank today.
Nothing could get through the phalanx. Like, that was it. The Persians had cloth robes. They didn't have that much. They weren't that sophisticated. So Sparta and Athens just massacred the Persians and Thebans at this time. At the end of the war, they built a serpent column. This was made from all the burnt down bronze, iron, everything from the Persians. They melted it all down. They built a 26-foot column that had 3 serpent heads at the top and a gold vase in the middle. This was dedicated to 31 city-states that fought with Greece to defend the Persians. The Persians, after the end of this, they never returned to mainland Greece, and it changed the world. Like, we wouldn't be here today if the Battle of Plataea hadn't happened. But I'll remind you, Thebes was on the fucking wrong side of this war.
Yeah, what's going on with Thebes?
So what happened to the serpent column? This is interesting. Alexander the Great came in. And he said, this is a pretty cool serpent. I'm going to take this to Istanbul. Or back then it was called Constantinople. And this is where the column is. It's in Istanbul. Why is it not in Greece? I have no idea, but it needs to come back now.
Right now. Right now.
So, 480 BC, you guys. The Battle of Plataea happened. And what happened after that? Well, you had these big city-states. After Persia was no longer a threat to Greece, the city-states were like, we want control over this whole area. Yeah, Sparta down south. Sparta was an oligarchy. Like, I remember mentioning, it had 2 kings. And they didn't like democracy. They were like, we're all about the kings. We kill our children who are deformed. You start training to be in the military when you're like 4 or 5.
It's authoritarian. It's a fascist
No
state.
big deal. Like
state.
this is who we are. Greece needs to become this. And they actually won the whole Battle of Plataea, right? It was like more Spartan troops than anyone. So then Thebes, everyone hated Thebes. And then the Athenians were just doing their own thing. They had a lot of silver. So the Peloponnesian Wars happened mostly between these 3 cities for about 30 years. The way that the Peloponnese Wars started was the Siege of Plataea. Fucking Thebes. They just were like, Plataea is so close. We want them to be on our side. So they sent 300 guys, thought to be maybe ninjas, in the middle of the night. The ninjas came in.
Ninjas?
And said, hey, Plataea, we want you, like, to hang out with us, pledge us loyalty, we'll get your back. Plataea was like, fuck that. You sided with the Persians, why would we ever be loyal to you? And they killed off all 300 of these Theban ninjas. So Thebes was pissed, and Thebes was like, fine, screw that. We're going to come get you. We're going to get you bad. And they built a dirt ramp. They're like, this is the best fucking idea we've ever had. We're going to build a dirt ramp. The dirt ramp is going to break through the wall of Plataea. The Plataeans were like, screw that. Because, Papu Sotiri was pretty smart. And this is where he got it from. They were like, we're going to build a tunnel underneath the ramp. And we're going to dig out all the dirt that you're building your ramp with. And then we're going to build another wall. like this. It's gonna be fucking huge. And the Thebans were like, what's happening to our ramp? It's not there anymore. And the ramp kept shrinking as the Plataeans were digging, building their second wall. And this happened for 70 days before the Thebans knew what was going on. So then the Thebans were like, all right, so this ramp thing, like, isn't working out. Why don't we just torch the place? So they threw a bunch of brush and wall and brush and leaves in between these two walls, and they lit it on fire. But it didn't really matter, right? Because they were like mud, dirt walls. And it didn't get anything. And then there was like a giant cloud that came and a bunch of rain and the fire went out. So then the Thebans still couldn't take Plataea. So then the Thebans were like, okay, well, who do we have nearby they're good warriors who are actually smart? And they go down south to the Spartans and they're like, hey, this ramp didn't work out at all. We could use your help. And the Spartans are like, yeah, like whatever, no problem. So then the Spartans and the Thebans were like, okay, well, they need food. So what we'll do is we'll build a giant wall around the wall of Plataea. And they did. And this went on for several months. And the Plataeans eventually ran out of food, water, a little bit of everything. And they surrendered. And even though they surrendered, the Spartans and the Thebans killed everyone. Except for the 200 that actually were able to escape. So in modern day Plataea, when you drive through, you see these giant blocks. This is the old gate wall that the Spartans and Thebans built around ancient Plataea to freeze them out. And then we were there 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but you can touch these things. Isn't that cool? So now you know a little bit about the history of Greece.
I feel like there's a lot more that happens after this.
And when you go to visit Plataea and Thebes, you know a little bit more. We've covered so much, you guys. It's been a real treat. So after the Peloponnesian Wars, you have the Boeotian Wars. You have Alexander the Great, who came in and he leveled Thebes. He was pissed at Thebes, thought they were just the shittiest people ever.
There's so much that
and the Ottoman Empire.
To be continued.
And then you have
the Ottoman Empire.
The World War I, the World War II.
The last 2,000 years.
The last 2,000 years. And so that's it. If you have any questions on comments, you can email me. My email is at the bottom. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you. Good night.